concern is with the nature of the self. And as with Heidegger, the concern is, what does it mean to be in the world? Dasein, being in the world. What does it mean? The phenomenological discovery of intentionality, okay, all conscious acts are intentional acts, pointing to, meaning. Intentionality is the act that presents to me an object which otherwise is just what it is in itself. And in the intentional act of knowing, it becomes what it is for me. Okay, it becomes part of the for me. The for me is not just the isolated individual. It's me and my world, my understanding, my knowledge. You see, the whole thing organically related in that sense. Me. Now, that is the being, you see, that is creating its own meaning. My being. The for me. What then is the other, the in itself? Well, it's nothing but what it is for me. I don't know anything else about it but its for me-ness. I only know it as a phenomenal object. Yeah. So from the standpoint of intentional consciousness, the in itself is nothing. So the whole of being and nothingness is a tale of being and nothingness. Get it? Carl? Yeah, this is the interesting thing, because in Hegel you get the sense that the master-servant relationship is potentially an I-thou relationship, in which the I is a for me, and the thou is another for me. Okay? And the way Hegel plays it out in that selection you read, each of these is seeing the other as he is for me. Right? Now, the thing is about Sartre is that it's more a one-sided relationship. It's not an I-thou, but an I-it. That's Martin Buber's language. It's not an I-thou, it's an I-it. You see? So that the other person is, we tend to say, dehumanized. You see? If the in itself is indeed a human being and a consciousness, I don't know the other person's consciousness. I only know what he is for me. I don't know what he is for himself. And so in that sense, you never get inside the other self. And all you have is an I-it. In that sense, a one-way street. Now, he does point up that sometimes the I-it, not the I-it, sometimes the in itself, sort of rises up against you. And that's what happens to the flies, they rise up against the rest of things. But sometimes the I-it that rises up against you may be another person who does it out of the for-me-ness of his intentionality. But it's always antithesis, 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 the clash of opposites, dialectic struggle. So, in effect, you see, Sartre has a dialectical antithesis, thesis and antithesis with no synthesis. Because there's no universals. No synthesis.
So you have one person sees as I-it, and as the other person would, it's the same relationship?
Yeah, I suppose if you're talking of a father-child relationship, okay, the tendency of the child is to see the father as an it, especially in early adolescence growing up. Yes, and the, shall I say, the unsympathetic father is apt to see a child as just another it to be provided for, you see, as a for me in some other way. But my kids, you see. You get it between students in administration, or faculty in administration, where it's a we, them. You know, and I use the accusative case to get the dehumanization anyway. Yeah. Labour management. Well, it's no wonder that Sartre, one phase in his life, sort of allied himself with French Marxism. You see, because the theme of alienation runs through both. The dialectic with its alienation runs through both. Yes. Now, say that again, I missed it. Yeah. Wouldn't the in itself, you say inside of the dialectic? Oh. Yeah, you see, the in itself, insofar as it's made for me, I make it for me, the in itself is nothing less than what it is for me, as far as I'm concerned. That's why it's not. You say dissolved, he would say negated. Same thing. Well, the clash comes inasmuch as the in itself is resistant. Inasmuch as there is some a boomerang effect. Yes, or in those three people in that room, no exit, when the third person intrudes into the blood-budding relationship. And by intruding and making up to the one who's becoming for me, makes that one into a for me for herself. So that what was someone for me becomes just in itself, dissolving the for me-ness. I can't reach you anymore. You see? Or it could just be that the other person doesn't like me and slaps my face. You see? So, you know, just reflect for a moment on interpersonal relationships, and you see how realistic the description sounds. Which is why it makes such gripping and sickening plays and novels. All right, now, against that background, the transcendence of the ego. The transcendence of the ego. And the introduction by the editor, you'll find helpful in setting the context in relationship to Husserl. Now, I've already tried to do that, okay? But you'll find it helpful in that. The text itself begins on page 31, and the opening lines will, I think, begin to make some sense. For most philosophers, the ego is an inhabitant of consciousness. Hey, that sounds like Descartes, doesn't it? Inhabiting my consciousness is the self that has the consciousness. Some affirm its formal presence at the heart of erelebnis. Erelebnis is literally lived throughness. Erelebnis, livedness, it's the German equivalent of concrete experience. The notion we found in both Whitehead and Dewey. Concrete experience is here, if you pardon the new verb, existentialized. Okay? Lived experience, concrete experience in existential terms, erelebnis. Some affirm its formal presence as an empty principle of unification, unifying the self like a transcendental ego. Others, psychologists for the most part, claim to discover its material presence as the center of desires and acts in each moment of the psychic life. That sounds like a behaviorist. We'd like to show here that the ego is neither formally, as transcendental structure, nor materially in consciousness. It's outside, in the world. It's a being over the world, like the ego of another. Now, there's no hidden soul tucked away within. All that self refers to is in the world, being in the world. That's I. On page, he refers to Kant and builds up the historical story that you're familiar with. Then on page 34, at the bottom of the page, he formulates the question arising from Descartes' cogito. Bottom of 34, is the I that we encounter in our consciousness made possible by the synthetic unity of our representations? Now, whose position is that? Kant. The I made possible by the synthetic unity of our representations. Or is it the I which in fact unites the representations to each other? Now, if we reject all the more or less forced interpretations of I think offered by post-Kantians, which to solve the problem of the existence in fact of the I, we meet in our path the phenomenology of Husserl. So to Husserl he turns, and Husserl's attempt at a scientific kind of phenomenology. Page 37, he says towards the top, Husserl gives his reply, having determined in his logical investigations that the me is a synthetic and transcendent production of consciousness, is a synthetic transcendent production of consciousness, yes, intentionality. He reverted in ideas towards a new phenomenology and phenomenological philosophy to the classic position of the transcendental I. This I, so to speak, behind each consciousness would light up each phenomenon presented in the field of attention. This transcendental consciousness becomes thoroughly personal. So forth. And what Sartre goes on to do is simply to repudiate that at the top of page 38. It's certain that phenomenology doesn't need any appeal to any such unifying and individualizing I. By intentionality, consciousness transcends itself. It unifies itself by escaping from itself. Notice how he loves paradoxical statements. You see? And I think he loves them because he's trying to capture the dialectic. Thesis and antithesis. It unifies itself by escaping from itself. Yes, in the intentionality of dealing with something new, I am transcending what I already am and becoming something different. You see? Yeah, it's as if Whitehead or Dewey were saying, each experience, each event, each problem adds to the experience that is the continuing core of you. What constitutes personal identity, after all, in the empiricist tradition? But the continuity of consciousness born by memory. But as Hume pointed out, those memories are atomistic, fragmented, dirty. So there's actually no continuity of consciousness. And for Sartre, each moment of intentionality is anew. You see? And it's in the focus of attention, in this new experience, that my consciousness is unified once more. So it unifies itself by escaping from itself into a new kind of unification. Somehow or other, every new experience has to be integrated into what we are. So then, on 39, about 8 lines down, it's consciousness that unifies itself concretely by a play of transversal intentionalities, which are concrete and real retentions of past consciousness. Yeah, because not only do I encounter a new experience, but I live with my memories of the past. I grab onto a past experience, and in the intentionality towards that past experience, you see, I'm incorporating into this new unity, which is me, the past as well as the present, and the emerging future. But I do it every moment in the me, in the intentionality of the now. It's almost as if Whitehead would say, here you have positive and negative prehensions. Positive prehensions that are unified into the decision, negative prehensions that are rejected. All right, you move on further, and he addresses himself to this all the way through, I think, to about page 60, but look at page 49, and see if this illustration helps. The very last line on 48, when I run after a streetcar, when I look at the time, when I'm absorbed in contemplating a portrait, there's no I. There is consciousness of the streetcar having to be overtaken. That's what you're conscious of. That's what focuses your attention. That's where the intentionality is. Everything else is brought to bear on that. A new unity. In fact, I'm then plunged into the world of objects. It's they that constitute the unity of my consciousness. It's they that present themselves with values, attractive qualities. But me, the self, I've disappeared. There's no self-awareness in that process. If you're really concentrating on the streetcar, it's got to be overtaken. If at the same time you're self-conscious in the process of doing it and thinking of the spectacle you're making to all the people who are watching you, you see, then there is a little bit of self-consciousness. But in the absorption in the streetcar, no. I've annihilated myself. There's no place for me at this level. It's not a matter of chance due to a momentary lapse of attention. It happens because of the very structure of consciousness. Get that business, the structure of consciousness. Here's his phenomenological description, illustrated by the streetcar, you see, showing the structure of consciousness. Page 50, let's see. No, page 60. Page 60, let's study there. The I, page 60, the little paragraph, the I is the ego as the unity of actions. The me is the ego as the unity of conscious states, qualities. The distinction one makes between these two aspects, the I and the me, two aspects of the same reality, seems simply functional, grammatical. Now, in the section that follows on the constitution of the ego, he picks up on that paragraph and says, in effect, that the ego is constituted of actions, states, and qualities. Actions, states, and qualities. Okay. So that on 61, he starts into states as transcendent unities of consciousness. And that runs to page 68, where he picks up on actions. But in order to get what he means by states, look at page 66. Hatred is a state of mind. It's not simply an act of thinking, feeling. It's an enduring, as it were, state of mind. And he says that by this term state, I've tried to express the character of passivity, which is constituted of hatred. You're not doing something, you're just hating. It's a state of mind. So then, when you get to actions on page 68, you notice that he says at the bottom of the page, would like to remark that concerted action is, first of all, the transcendent. Transcend, simply a state of mind. Take, for instance, playing the piano, driving a car, riding. These are actions taken in the world of things. It's the concrete realization of something. Actions. And he works with that a little, and then on 71, pulls it together. You notice the new heading, the constitution of the ego is the pole of action, states, and qualities. All three. And you might want to look, for instance, on page 77. No, 76, back up there. The new paragraph on 76, the second sentence. The ego is the spontaneous, transcendent unification of states and actions. Spontaneous? Yeah, just, if you like, happens. Not necessarily planned. Transcendent? Yes, because in that I transcend what I was. By acting, I transcend what I was and become something I am not yet. It's a transcendent, a self-transcending, an old self-transcending. Unification of states and actions. The spontaneous, transcendent unification of states and actions. And on 77, he says, everyone, by consulting the results of his intuition, of course, is the act of looking at the structures of consciousness in phenomenological ways, can observe that the ego is given as producing its states. We undertake here a description of the transcendental ego, of the transcendent ego, rather, not transcendental, but transcendent. Important difference. Right? Transcendental is Kant's a priori structures. Transcendent is rising beyond by becoming something new. Okay? So we begin with the undeniable fact that each new state is fastened directly to the ego as its origin. This mode of creation is creation ex nihilo, in the sense that the state is not given as having formerly been in the me. I make it for me. I create it for me. I'm creating me. Before me. My being in the world. So, next paragraph, the unifying act of reflection fastens each new state to the concrete totality, the me. Reflection isn't confined to apprehending a new state as attaching to this totality, as fusing with it. It intends a relation which traverses time backwards and gives the me as the source of the state. I made it for me. Okay. So, that's the way he goes. Now, let's see. 88. Take a look there. Now, let's back up a little. Top of 88. Phenomenology will understand without difficulty that the ego may at the same time be an ideal unity of states, the majority of which are absent, and a concrete totality wholly giving itself to intuition. A tree or a chair exists no differently. It's a concrete totality of states. And then the next paragraph. What radically prevents the acquisition of real cognitions of the ego, that is to say, really knowing the ego, is the very special way in which it's given to reflective consciousness. And here he is making a distinction that runs pretty well throughout the book between reflective and non-reflective consciousness. When you're running for the streetcar, totally absorbed in that, that's unreflective consciousness, non-reflective consciousness. But when you are thinking about yourself running for the streetcar,